Hello and welcome to this AWI Extension WA webinar on WaterSmart Management Strategies. I'm Georgia Pugh, AWI Extension WA Project Manager. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and the recording will be made available following this live event via YouTube. In today's webinar, we'll be hearing from Associate Professor Nick Callow, Co-Director of the Centre for Water and Spatial Science at UWA. Then we'll be hearing from Michael Wright, Farm Manager at Rhodes Pastoral, then Wayde Robertson of Yalup Farm. You'll be given the opportunity to ask a few questions at the conclusion of each speaker's presentation, and each speaker will be hanging around for some questions, time permitting, at the end of the webinar. So feel free to put through questions at any time in the chat throughout the webinar and also at the conclusion when the questions will be answered. Feel free to put your questions through the chat, as I said, and turn your mic off if you do want to ask the question in person. So turn yourself off mute so you can ask your question during the allocated time to ask questions. So that we don't get any interruptions, though, please keep yourself on mute throughout the rest of the webinar, but please turn your camera on. It's always great to see actual human beings at the end of this ether. Okay, that's enough from me. I'll hand over to Nick Callow from UWA. Thank you, Nick.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great to be here and talk a little bit about water. So we'll see if this slide projection moves. So basically wanted to sort of share with you some of the lessons and experiences that we've sort of had out of this project called WaterSmart Dams or WaterSmart Strategies. So WaterSmart Dams was a sort of collaborative project across a whole pile of different partners and trying to, I guess, use the best bits of everyone's, sort of skill set. So, my team at the university in terms of some of the monitoring, the R&D, and then building some of these water planning tools, the grower group lines, some of the grower groups, and awesome people like Wayde, who were generous enough to lend us one of his dams to experiment on, and hosting some of the demonstration sites. And what we were really trying to do with this project is not muck around in the laboratories at the university, but build things at scale of adoption on farms in real systems, try them. Don't believe the manufacturer's numbers, and none of our numbers looked anything like what the manufacturers say things do in the field. So that's, a useful lesson, but probably not that surprising to anyone. We also got other parts of this program that people may be interested in trying to find some more information about, and that was what we call the broader WaterSmart Farms. And so this bit is the Smart Dams component, but there was also another component looking at improving groundwater targeting and also micro on-farm desalination. And there's some good resources that you can find on some of that. And I guess if there's one thing to sort of say, some of the things I'm going to talk about today, they might be right for some people and might be water security options that are right for your farm business, but they won't be right for everyone. And it's looking at, at the nature of your business, how much water you need, what sort of qualities of water you need, your appetite for risk, your appetite for capital expenditure, and then coming to some conclusions. So that, in particular, that micro on-farm desalination stuff's another, really nice part of the puzzle. Here we go. So really the motivation for this project was, I guess, there was this significant concern that we haven't really updated a lot of our science or options around water security. So if we look, say, particularly at farming system science, whether in the broadacre cropping world or in the livestock world, we're investing large amounts of R&D into improving our cropping systems and our machinery and our in-season nutrition, our animal genetics and all of those components. And that's what we've got to do to remain competitive. But in a water sense, when we look at this, we've got a lot of people who are still relying on 1960s and 70s water infrastructure. The farms are sort of full with, dozens potentially of, these, 1.5 or 2 megalitre dams, and they don't necessarily work with modern cropping systems. So, for example, the conversion to no-till has also corresponded with some shifts in our rainfall patterns. So these things in combination really mean that we don't get the runoff into dams. And so we also need to be much more focused on, how we work with our climate. Here's a couple of graphs from You know, I pulled one from Cunderdin, and they're tracking along at a decile 3 year at the moment. And one from down more in the sort of you know, central sort of Great Southern, so down near Maynard, and you know, much happier sort of story there around this sort of, you know, decile 8 over the growing season to date. So you know, the nature of our sort of rainfall patterns mean that, you know, you're going to have those, you know, those better years, you're going to have those more lean years. Looking at some of the people that are trying to build systems to also optimise better capture of water across, you know, things that you can't really rely on, like thunderstorms over summer. But, you know, one of the fellows that hosted one of the sites for us, running a whole pile of sheep out near Merredin in Western Australia, you know, that ability to capture thunderstorms with higher performing catchments was really key for him getting, you know, through that dry season. You know, we're in this, you know, challenging space where we need a hell of a lot of water right at the end of the dry season. We've got to carry over large amounts of water storage, and so we need water infrastructure that works. It's just going for the space bar to advance the slide, which is not going to work very well. So yeah, there's a whole series of demonstration sites that were developed, and you can find some more information if you're interested in this, if you look for the WaterSmart Dams project or WaterSmart Farms. So yeah, again, whole pile of partners, things at scale, and a whole pile of really fantastic hosts who, you know, trialled different sorts of technologies. Got Wayde, who'll maybe share his thoughts on the floating cover that he tried on his property. And really sort of learning those lessons together, which is, you know, I think what great projects are about, and also making sure things work. You know, it's not just people dreaming up ideas and suggesting they're great when they just don't actually work. So when we talk about water, I guess we sort of break it into sort of 4 key components, and that is a focus on kind of more runoff, so getting more water into dams, keeping the water in the dams, a little bit of a focus on water quality, and we think that's a really important part of the puzzle that maybe people aren't thinking about or valuing. You know, if you're shifting and evolving your business to looking at, you know, prime, you know, high quality livestock production, you know, that sort of system is going to work better, and you're going to get enhanced, you know, weight gain and, you know, productivity benefits from using a higher quality water. And so, you know, that's really key message in not just valuing I've got some water on my property, because we see people, you know, who are, you know, sitting there at the end of their, you know, or, you know, trying to maybe say get in their pre-emergent program or something like that. They're just relying on all the carryover water that they've, you know, got on the farm, but they're using really quite specific chemicals, really high cost chemicals, as that part of a mixed farming operation. And equally, you know, livestock just hanging on to the last bits of water, you know, it's not going to be good for them. And so, you know, the right qualities of water is an important part of the puzzle. It's not just a quantity story. And then the last one, maybe sort of briefly introduce this at the end, is some of the water planning tools, where we've tried to condense a lot of the science that we've done in the work, a lot of the costs and the economics, package them up and allow people to experiment on some of the things that we're talking about here. Next slide. So one of the things we did look at was going back to the roaded catchments and sort of presuming that most of the audience is sort of familiar with these. So here we're sort of going in, stripping out the sandy topsoils, going into the clay bottom and trying to really make these, you know, compacted, fit for purpose catchments. And really reiterating, when we do a lot of the analysis of water security on farms and where a lot of dams fail, typically it's not about the size of the dam. The most typical problem with a dam is its catchment. And so, you know, really going to, you know, you don't necessarily need, you know, 45 2 megalitre dams to sort of be water secure. In fact, you'll probably find that all of them will run out at about the same week in, you know, late January or early February in a drought, which is not very helpful. So a bit like a range of things, you know, a diversity of size, really well maintained and adequately sized roaded catchments is really important. And capturing these water in these kind of particular rainfall niches. So this sort of 8 to 12 millimetre per day, some of them, you know, a little bit better performing than that, is really key. but also a real challenge in the industry. You know, getting this water infrastructure built, laying your hands on well-trained contractors who can do this work, or people who are doing it themselves. You know, we have lost a lot of people out of the industry. They've tended to go and, you know, operate, you know, machinery in the mining industry, which is a challenge. So, you know, we really need, you know, better design, but yeah, a strong focus or better focus on getting that catchment component working. Also trialled some sort of bit more novel methods. So this one was a repurposed grain tarpaulin. So these were trying to target much lower thresholds of rainfall. So the roaded catchment I was just talking about is that sort of 6 to 8 millimetre per day to then trigger rainfall. Whereas this one here, site down near Jacob along the south coast of WA, it starts to run rainfall after about 0.8 of a millimetre. We had another one that we trialled in association with Sepwa out near Esperance, and again about that millimetre of rainfall. And what's really significant here is really being able to capture this additional rainfall. So a huge amount of our rainfall, you know, is those small to medium rainfall days where we might get, you know, 5 to 10 mils of rain, you know, keeps the crops ticking along. But in a runoff perspective, in a conventional farming system, you don't really capture any or much runoff. You're just kind of waiting for those, you know, 15, 20, 25 mil in a day, you know, sort of rainfall events. And sometimes they just don't come along. So the site that we ran at Esperance, I think the highest sort of rainfall day that they had at that site over the 2 years we were running there was about 18 mils, was the highest rainfall day. So a conventional system that was relying on runoff from paddocks, zero runoff, zero water, whereas these high-performing catchments is, you know, one way to run. You don't have to necessarily go with this technology. We'd also sort of steer people maybe in the direction, rather than maybe going for the repurposed tubs, but going to dedicated surfaces. You know, obviously they've got to be well fenced out. You've got to keep the livestock off them to optimise the life. And there are some significant costs of those, but we have seen some examples of people picking up and adopting these, building fully lined catchments into fully lined dams, and then they're operating with a pure rainwater. And their comment around that is that they're not necessarily just a water quantity game that they're trying to play. Their performance in things like, you know, crop spray, in herbicide resistance, in ryegrass knockdown is totally transformative to their business. So using water that's never touched a grain of dirt and using a pure tap water, which is exactly what those chemicals have all been developed in laboratories to use, is really been a key part of how they've evolved their thinking about water security on the farming operation. So here's the example at the Wandell's property out near Mount Ridley, about an hour sort of east and north of Esperance. So you can see here the proportion of rainfall. So if you go to that sort of conventional system, 0% of the rainfall would have been captured from 25 mil. Roaded catchments, you know, you're capturing somewhere in the order of, you know, 20 to 30% of the rainfall. Then you've also got to factor in the actual runoff coefficient is, you know, only about sort of 30, 40, 50% of that rainfall. So then, you know, if you've got 200 mils or 300 mils of annual rainfall, in terms of how much of that you're potentially turning into runoff, you're turning out in, you know, 10 to 15% of that into runoff on those sorts of systems. Whereas the high performing systems, you know, are capturing, you can see the stats at that site, you know, somewhere in the order of about 85% of the rainfall, much higher runoff coefficient as well. So they're a really good option that might be part of a solution for some people. This is one of the other trials that we ran with the Gosses down near Darkin area. So we had a look at some different road catchments here, some treatments here. So just like you know, cleaning them up, getting rid of the weeds, giving them a bit of a roll, just, you know, just tweaking and improving those runoff coefficients. Again, and just, you know, slightly more performance out of those. So again, you know, these sorts of systems, you just really getting them dialed in, getting them working as best you can, just capturing it as much water as you can. So just emphasising, rotor catchments are great, but don't put them in and just forget about them for 10 or 15 years. They do need regular maintenance, and regular maintenance keeps them working in a much better sort of window and capturing more runoff. So it's really, really important to keep up to date with that. Whoops, I'm going to advanced slides with my keyboard again. One of the other ones we looked at was subsurface drainage. So the idea here is some of the properties in the higher rainfall zones, some of the areas which running much more sort of intensive livestock or mixed farming operations. These areas particularly, so this was near Kojonup in these classic kind of duplex soils, really bad waterlogging problems. The fella here that hosted the site, Brad Ashton, was, couldn't really access a major part of his paddock. And so he was pretty keen on the subsurface drainage. And what we were interested to do is try and just, can we take all of that water out of the paddock? And, what sort of quality are we actually dealing with? And we were quite impressed about, so we're deliberately quite high in the landscape here. We're definitely not doing this in low-lying areas, and no evidence of, sort of salt on the surface. But in this case, his drain had better drinking water in terms of salinity than my tap water in Perth. So that was a really good sign, really sort of high quality water. We are going to do a little bit of follow-up testing, hopefully this year. We've got a couple of sites that are starting to run off because we've had some good rains and things. So we do want to do a little bit of nutrient testing out of these, just a little bit concerned, or just to double check that we're not sort of maybe capturing a whole pile of nitrates and things like that in the water that might have some sort of down system effects on the system. So particularly on livestock focused operations. So that's one of the things that we just want to track. But yeah, in terms of water, they were good. They were a little bit average in a dry year. And so we'd say that this is very much not a drought proofing option. What it does do is it gives you a really, good, quality of water from what we can see. It works really well in an average to above average year. It'll top up all of your dams. It means that you start that next maybe sequence with all of the water, resources topped right up. So we would, basically filling, a small to mid-sized dam out of one sort of subsurface drain system here. Next one, we want to sort of look at keeping water in dams and sort of doing some work there, and included a bit of benchmarking. So just, how much water is being lost from dams due to evaporation and leakage. And basically across the sites, we looked at some different locations. But yeah, in this order of around about just over 1.5 metres of water being lost to the dams from evaporation, and then the leakage rates that we were seeing were actually in the order of maybe 0.5 metre through to 1 metre. So it's obviously very site dependent. We did do some work trying to look at some trials of some leakage polymers that are sort of added to dams to try and clog them up. Unfortunately, the sheep decided to sort of impact our monitoring and wrap all the waterloggers around their feet and pull them out of the water, which didn't really help things. So I can't really report back on the numbers from that. But yeah, anecdotally, it sort of seems to have had an impact. And some of the small amounts of data, which I don't really have enough confidence to present, do suggest that they had a significant effect. When we look at the cost-benefit economics of water, actually treating leaky dams is pretty much the single cheapest way to get water. So maybe in the order of like 50 cents to $1 a kilolitre, which is certainly a hell of a lot cheaper than buying it and carting it from the scheme. The other thing was just benchmarking, how much water do I lose to evaporation and leakage? And so it was this exercise in just going through with some of the site hosts who were, hosting these ones that we're able to do the detailed monitoring at. So yeah, if you get your dam absolutely full by the, start of October at the end of winter, 100% full, come April, presuming that there's no more rainfall and there's no demand, you've only got about 50% of the available capacity due to evaporation and leakage by the end of it. So it's a really important thing when you're looking at your water resources. Effectively, for most of them, if you've got a 5 megalitre dam, that means you've got about 2.5 megalitres of actual usable water. Okay, go here. So one of the other ones we looked at was some of these dam covers. This is a site down near Gardner on the south coast. And so the figures were very consistent. Wayde will jump in later and maybe with some of the ones he hosted at another trial site, but pretty consistent results. So the manufacturers say that these are 99% effective at reducing evaporation. The answer is they're about 70% effective under the covered area. And so by the time that you work out, you can't cover the whole dam, you need them in the water, otherwise they can be susceptible to blowing up. So, most of the sites we were seeing somewhere in the order of a 25 to 40% reduction in evaporation, but that can be really, quite significant, and that can be the difference between having and running out of water. Cost there about, that $13 to $15 a square metre is what we paid for the trials. This is Wayde's little wee dam. So we put out this about 180 square metre cover. Out the side, it's about a 1.92 megalitre dam. You can see some of the results I've got there on the left hand side. So basically we've done some of the sort of localized monitoring. We've also used regional weather stations and built some models of the evaporation processes, and then that allows us to kind of investigate the different with a cover, without the cover, and quantify these. What does this sort of mean overall? So if you look at it across the full year at this particular dam on this particular property, so we've gone under the uncovered scenario of having in the order of maybe what have we got? Sorry, I've lost my. So we've reduced the total evaporation pretty significantly. Really, if we look at that scenario, if we got that dam to 100% full, we'd by the end of the following dry season have a good sort of couple of thousand litres, couple of 100 kilolitres of extra water within that system. It does kind of reinforce that message that doesn't really, key to having a good dam is having a good catchment. So, if you don't have that dam full, you are still going to sort of run out of water. We look at dam covers as being what we'd call kind of incremental and not transformative. So, they give you a small benefit. They're no substitute. If you've got a catchment, a dam which doesn't have a particularly well-performing catchment, then we'd say go and invest some time and effort fixing up the catchment. Don't go and, spend it buying covers. In terms of some of the cost benefit sort of analysis that we did, so worked out the cost of water based on the cost of the cover and things is somewhere in the order of about $2.10 to $3.60 a kilolitre. And depending, again, on a whole pile of scenarios of where you use your water and how you'd fill gaps, the payback period is somewhere in the order of 1 and definitely less than 4 years. And that's obviously well below the lifespan of the covers. Just sort of go through. So one of the other things we looked at was also just evaporation from vegetation covered dams. So they can offer a whole pile of benefits. So, a lot of vegetation filtering of the inflows, much higher water quality. In this case, the evaporative losses are around about 28 to 30% less, and that's a story of reducing the wind across the dam. So they remain a really good option. Seems to be still a lot of hesitancy about integrating vegetation in dams. Certainly this one, the leakage rates were incredibly low. It's a really nice dam site on some really nice sort of clay that's really well sealed. But the combination of all of those paper barks around that dam were really effective in being a pretty low cost way to keep some more water in the system. The last one I'll sort of flag pretty quickly is just some of the water quality sampling. So we did some of this work to just get a sense of, what sort of water qualities are out there, looked at sort of bore water, dam water, rainwater, but also scheme water. This one was more focused. This was work that we did more around the Merredin area, and obviously people that are maybe a little bit more cropping focused in that neck of the woods. But one of the things there, for example, was, from a cropping and spraying perspective, pH is pretty important on various sprays. So say, for example, glyphosate, is a weak acid. It doesn't want a really alkaline base water to start with. But for example, the scheme water in some of the areas that we sampled where we've got, water sitting around either in concrete pipes or in some cases on farms in concrete tanks for long periods of time. So you want to be a little bit careful with some of that, and obviously, doing a lot of water quality measurements before you put, that 99% of what goes into your spray tank in. That's an important part of what gets used in that system. And equally, these base parameters, salinity and those sorts of things for livestock, and or considering things like, strategies to reduce the E. coli load and things like that. A little sort of shout out to one of the things that some of the researchers have been working on here that we're also keen on. So this was some work that we did using artificial intelligence and satellites. So this was tried on the Kojonup local government area. So we're actually going into satellites and measuring farm water supply, or sort of the kind of total area of farm dams, and we show some really good data in terms of being able to track regional, water trends and things like that. So we're really keen to sort of be able to do that, to maybe provide that as a bit of a tool, one, to sort of people, on farms to sort of understand this more multi-year sorts of trends that we're seeing, and where you're standing with water quality, although, I think most people have got a pretty good understanding of that, but also being maybe able to feed that better into the policy space to, really emphasise some of these particular times when we do, require government and policymakers to be probably a little bit more organised and ahead of the game, where we're better able to see some of these, challenging seasons coming, and to be maybe slightly better equipped to not just be reactive, but to be a bit more proactive with some of these things. Last one is this sort of pulling it all together. So this thing that we call the Water Evaluation Platform, or WEP. And that was about, trying to pull a lot of the science and the understanding together into a single platform. So it was really based on a lot of the science that we did. It, is there to predict water and water security, allows people to, build a system around their own dam and farm, and so things like how many livestock you're trying to support, or spraying, or other sorts of applications, whether you've got an existing dam and you're trying to find an optimal catchment size, or you're trying to design both from scratch. So there's a range of analysis tools within that we've tried to put together. It's based on this sort of pretty simple water balance model that pulls in gridded meteorological data, specific for your property. So you click on that and it pulls in the daily data. It looks at rainfall and evaporation. It's got different sorts of catchments, and you can build multiple catchments within that, or even factoring, if you're transferring water between the farm to sort of some key dams and supporting them. And then it's got these demand functions around, putting in things like, I'm trying to spray this many hectares at this many litres per hectare, or my specific livestock demand. For the livestock demand, it actually then sort of pulls in the real climatology on the best available figures that we've got. You can also go in and customise a lot of these settings if you've got a better understanding of the demand that you've got. Or other figures, you can customize a lot of those things. So if you're interested in that, you can find that here by this link here, Water Evaluation Platform.app. Sort of slowly, Google's learning to find it. So if you type in Water Evaluation Platform app, you should be able to find it. But that's, I think, really about it from me.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thanks so much, Nick. So much information there, and you managed to summarize that all really clearly. So thanks for that. So anyone who wants to jump into the WaterSmart Dams project, there's a very good up-to-date website there. You can dive in and learn a lot more. And I really encourage you to check out the water evaluation platform. If there's any questions for Nick, please feel free to come off mute and speak now, or you can still pop any questions through in the chat. We'll come back and have more questions a bit later. But yeah, now's the time to ask a question of Nick directly if you've got one burning at the moment.
I think there's one that's just popped into the chat. I might quickly answer. So the question in the chat was, did you encounter any legislative barriers to establishing the demonstration sites? So no, didn't have any problems with that. We did have some actually good support across a couple of different government agencies, Department of Water and Department of Regional Industries and wherever they are, DPIRD, Primary Industries and Regional Development. So yeah, no problems there. We did do a little bit of monitoring. There was some concern around those enhanced catchments around microplastics. So we did some monitoring for those, which turned out we had more microplastics floating around our lab than what we had in the sediment of the dam. Probably everyone wearing synthetic jumpers doesn't help. So yeah, no problems there.
Terrific. Thanks for that question. We might let Nick catch his breath and we'll move on to Michael Wright of Rhodes Pastoral. Michael, if you're there, you can turn yourself off mute, please, and
Yep.
take it away. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks. Well, water management and sustainable and pure water. So we run 17,000 hectare property in the Boyup and Kojonup Shires. 55% of the business is livestock. So key to that is quality water equals quality livestock. And so we've spent the last 12 years really looking at improving our water supply. And we came up with the idea we'd probably put 4 key dams in strategic places across the property, which is over a period of time, of course, and making sure they're on a good seepage or a good catchment area, like 20 to 30 hectares, that was able to pick up water and fill these dams. We do finish around 15 to 16,000 lambs each year through our finishing pens. So that requires a lot of water, along with, so at the moment we're about 54,000 sheep on property and 1,700 head of cattle. So there's a lot of mouths there to water. So our business has really invested heavily in water security. And the first thing I would say to most people is you've got to understand your quality of your water. If you don't carry a salt meter in your vehicle, you're not knowing what your water's up to. So you need to know and understand the quality of your water. I've got 4 or 5 of my staff with their own salt meters, so they can monitor the water qualities. Yeah, and drought proofing the farm, which is what we tried to do, to continue and to sell livestock in those periods where there isn't much water. I think Nick hit it on the head that once those dams get low, the quality drops away. So, and we've put in different size dams as well as the 4 key dams, which are about 20,000 cubes. One's 25,000 and a few 8,000s over the years. And strategic places where, in actual fact, if you use some of your topography, you've got to understand your topography too in your land and be able to push water, if you are able to a top of a hill and hold it in a tank and then pipe it to different paddocks if you can't get water into those paddocks. And we're finding that the cup and saucer works really well, like about a 5,000 litre container with its trough around it, keeps the water cool. Very important for livestock. They drink cool water and not hot water out of troughs. So when we do put in our piping, we're putting it in about 600-700 deep. So that water stays cool and flows into these tanks and troughs as a cool product. And it allows them to, particularly in finishing pens, to utilise that feed to its maximum point. So you're getting good carcass growth and getting the lambs or cattle out. I sort of look at water as quality water on a farm as part of your genetics. So you spend your money on your genetics and your livestock. So I call good quality water genetics too, because it's improving what you can do on your property, whether you're using it for spraying, watering your wife's garden, or watering livestock. And so we spend a lot of money on our genetics, well, we do, and I know a lot of farmers do, and rams or bulls, whatever they're into, and trying to improve their herds or flocks all the time. So you should be improving your water at the same time if you want to keep these businesses ticking along, especially when other people are running out of water. Or hold them in the tough times when the prices are down. You don't want it. You're not forced to sell animals. Yeah, so we use gravity as best we can as well in our landscape to let the water flow around. When we try to do a dam or some catchments each year, so we're putting a bit of money back into it regularly. Spraying your catchments is really important too, to keep that flow going. Now I'll just get onto my little pointer. Hopefully that works. There we go. Oops, it's not what I wanted to do. I'll go back. Yep. One dam that was sunk a long time ago on the property is at the bottom of the hill where a lot of people put all their dams. So this is salty as, it's like 5,000 parts. It's not very good. So we decided that we had the asset there. Well, let's turn it into a quality asset. So we, 17 years ago, we built a desalination plant. I'll just go to the next one. In a sea container, it's bespoke, costs 350 grand to build. We can pick it up and shift it. It does between 30 and 40,000 litres of beautiful water, better than the Perth water that Nick's drinking every day when we run it for 12 hours. It's run by a 47 kVA generator. It's a pretty funky bit of kit. It's got a lot of computers. It's air conditioned. It's reverse osmosis basically. And that's really got us through some tough times back 10, 12 years ago when we were getting a bit low on stock water before we really decided to do something about it and improve our dam systems and situation at Rhodes Pastoral. And we were able to finish our lambs, cart water to cattle, or push water up to my wife's garden, which is pretty important. This is built by a bloke by the name of, I won't say his name, but yeah, he's very good. He puts desalination units into boats. He's a really good operator. We thought a lot about it long and hard and how to do it, and we can pick the whole system up and move it around if we have to, but it's basically been sat on that dam. I'll just go back to my pointer, that's just gone to sleep. Move. Oh. Go back. Yeah, so this is just one of our finishing pens with a laneway behind the feeders. So we most of our merinos are finished in here, and the tail of the crossies. Each pen's about 50 metres by 100 metres, 5 feeders, 500 sheep. So that's a 5,000 litre cup and saucer with concrete around it. So when the animals walk up, the dust and stuff falls off them. They don't take so much rubbish up into the water trough. They're cleaned twice a week. We put a copper block in there to keep the algae out of it once a fortnight. Quality water is really important and easy accessed. So we actually got the shade sails on the side you can't see from that tank, and then roughage the water, and then the lollies are up the front in the lick feeders, and the laneway there where we fill them and move the livestock out. Yeah, look, stock water is a really important thing, and you've got to have good clean water and good access to it. We spend a fair bit of time in our catchments each year. A lot of my when we're spraying fire breaks, we make sure the guys are tidying up any roaded catchments that need cleaning. We've actually, over the last few years, realising that with the rainfall dropping off a bit, we've actually had to extend some of our catchments another 4 or 500 metres to keep those dams full too. So, you know, and using a good contractor, someone who's au fait with fall of water, packing this, finding the right clays to work with, really key. We've had a few leaky dams and we've tried the bentonite in them, and with mixed success. Some of them work, some of them haven't, to try and stop. But evaporation, yeah, I'd agree with Nick. We're losing about 1.5 to 2 metres of water out of these dams. So yeah, you got to fill them as much as you can every year. Anyway, that's about me, I think. I don't think I've got any more slides, or have I?
Thanks a lot, Michael. No, you're off the hook if you're done. That's terrific. Unless you wanted to add anything else. Thanks for sharing all those tips and the examples of what you guys are doing there at Rhodes Pastoral. It's super interesting. If there's any questions for Michael, please come off mute and speak up or chuck them through in the chat. I think Michael was happy to probably hang around until the end and we can have some more questions then as well. But in the meantime, Wayde's just jumping in and coming off mute. Thanks, Wayde. So yeah, Wayde Robertson's here to share his thoughts on his experience with being involved in the WaterSmart Dam project and some other initiatives they've got on their farm. Thanks, Wayde.
Thanks, Georgia. Thanks for having me here. Yeah, so we farm not too far away from actually Michael Wright. We're just southeast of Boyup, between Boyup and Coconut. We run a mixed farming operation, cropping and sheep. We're probably about 75% crop these days. It's slowly increasing and the sheep are decreasing, which will probably hold that sort of level. It gets us through summer. It's a bit easier with the stubble management and feeding. So we did the Daisy Dam cover. I came across this as currently a part of Southern Dirt in Coconut, and that's sort of how I became a part of this trial. It's really only to hold water in the dams. There's no benefit from getting more catchment or runoff. It's just a reduce evaporation trial. Most of our dams on the farm rely on either subsurface or surface runoff. This dam that we had the trial in has a bit of a combination of both, a small area of subsurface in front, and it's also got a little bit of a laneway that runs nearby the dam. It's probably 200-300 metres that tries to catch down into the dam. During the period of the trial, we did have some probably quite dry years. It never really got to its typical sort of Brook wet that we'd expect. So we really never got the dam full, even though this year it's almost full at the moment. We've had a really good winter so far. We went this way purely because, yeah, land's not cheap. It's a bit of a scarce, limited resource. So trying to keep the water in the dam as much as we could was the idea. If I just click forwards. So it's not a big dam, as Nick was saying. It's only a couple of thousand yard, really. It's quite a sort of typical, I don't know, old school dam you'd see in the region. We've never given it a birthday or done much to it. The cover itself was just two, basically they're like a pool cover. We laid them on the front bank and unwound the first one, pulled it into the water halfway, laid the next one next to it, clipped them together and then dragged them across the dam. 4 steel posts, one in each corner with a heap of rope so the cover can float around in the dam and do its own thing. In the photos, it does look like the cover's quite small, but as the dam gets very empty, each corner of that cover will be up on the dirt and sheep will have access to water just sort of along each side of the dam. So it's very good in the way, I think, as the dam gets low, the cover gets more effective. So certainly getting late in that March, April period, the cover's getting more and more effective for you. It's a dam we've never had go dry, but always gets very low. Yeah. Yeah. Oops. So yeah, there's a few more photos of the cover when we installed it. I'm not water quality wise, it's I think middle of the road. Salt wise, it's very good. It's nothing special in there. Obviously, with more and more crop in the paddock, we're finding a lot less runoff down into the dam. I probably in the cover game, I certainly see it a very beneficial for a number of our dams. I think the bigger dams, it would be a bit tricky to manhandle and get the cover on the dam. When we put this on, we had 3 of us there, and it was quite easy. But I think getting a really big cover would certainly be a lot more tricky with the small dams. I think it's a quick, easy solution. Cost-wise, it's not too expensive, and you do have the potential to pack it up, move it to another dam if you'd like, I guess. So yeah, that's sort of the cover for us. Going on a bit on what Nick was saying with the subsurface drainage, we've done a little bit ourselves, and we had a part of this WaterSmart Dams, some stuff at Ben Webb's and, as Nick was saying, Brad Ashton's. So we'd done a little bit ourselves. We sort of played around with a few different types of drains. So these 2 photos are of the same dam. One's just on one side of the dam, and the second photo's from the back side of the dam, looking over the same spot. These were actually not using slotted pipe. It was just a coarse aggregate in a large trench. It's just a single trench going up the hill. It's always gets waterlogged further up, but sort of, yeah, you get bogged up there, but you never really get water in the dam. So it was more about trying to help that water gain access to a highway to basically get itself down and into the dam quickly and easily, and let the crop grow better. It's always annoying with an empty dam or a dam that's low and you've got waterlogged areas up the hill because of the clay in the soil holding it up. So the trenches we did were ranged from, they were either 300 wide or 700 wide, filled with coarse aggregate, 600 to 900 mil deep. This one here is quite a big trench. It was a 700 by 900 deep. The aggregate was just sourced on farm to keep the cost down of like a very sort of like you'd find in a truck arrested bed gravel. We have a little screener that we take the fines out with, and then got a big spreader that we could load it into to be able to cart it to site and put it in the trench. We also did a few some other sites with the 300 wide trench and having a slotted pipe in it with a sock on it and also without. Nowadays we're just moving more towards a pipe slotted pipe in the trench with a sock and a little bit of coarse aggregate around that as well. So this photo here just shows an end view of the trench coming out into an open drain. The photo on the left, sort of where the trench is. This sort of area would never grow much, even on an average year when it's it'd just get very waterlogged and always struggles. And that's just a basic 300 mil wide trench with the gravel in it. The interesting thing for us will be seeing how long these trenches last, whether they silt up over time and need to be replaced. Yeah, and whether how long the piped ones will last, I guess, as well. So there's some more photos of the cover. It looks quite small in that there, but yeah, as the dam gets low, you couldn't really have any bigger cover at all. would be no access for the stock. So I think that's everything from me, Georgia.
Thanks, Wayde. That's terrific to see those examples. So thanks for giving up your time. I'd like to open the floor to anyone who wants to come off mute and ask a question or put through something in the chat for any of our guest speakers. I'm happy to ask the question if you want to pop it through in the chat and we can all hear it. But just to kick things off, you're all busy talking to you, Michael and Wayde, with respect to on-farm activities. When is the best time that you've found for your business to actually do some of these water improvement projects? I'll let you go first, Wayde.
Well, I find for the covers thing, it's trial and error, I guess, seeing what dams are going to be the most beneficial for a cover, and a lot of us would know by now which dams are troubled dams. Catchment wise, best time to do it is before it rains. Get it done before it rains, so you're going to catch some water.
And Michael, just so that you come in on that as well. When's best for Rhodes Pastoral with respect to your yearly maintenance, or when do you find the time to go and look at these bigger projects with your water quality and increasing quantity?
Yeah, at the moment, it's the best time to keep those catchments free of weeds at the minute. Probably end in January through to the first rains, as Wayde said, putting in your new dams or you're extending or putting new catchments in. But we try and pick or find those sites the year before when we know, and drill them so we know we're right to go when we want to build a dam. So yeah, like January to April is the main time we're looking to sort out water quality issues, building dams and catchments.
Nick, what have you found with the projects that you've been involved with respect to when is best to install some of these solutions from your perspective? Is that in line with what the others have said? And are there any other tips with incorporating this into the yearly calendar?
Yeah, I think for me, I think some of those things in particular that, Michael was talking about, like just, the people who integrate the water planning into their business. So they're sitting down and they're working out, how am I going to access, the machinery that I need to run things? How am I going to access, what's my kind of nutrient strategy in my budget? And then, we see examples where people maybe aren't including water in that, or water's the thing that gets lopped off. But I think really, just valuing water in the farm business is really fundamental and critical. I think chipping away and those things, that, people have sort of described is really important. I don't know. I think, trying, I think where you can, in those average to better than average years, starting to make some of those decisions to try and set yourself up. It's really hard to make decisions when you're in a dry season, when you're water short. You've got to go and make those more reactive decisions to, move stock off the farm or things like that. It's certainly not the time, to be, stuck in that sort of situation. So I think, just trying to be proactive, trying to chip away at things, valuing water, and having water, central to the way that you're running the farm business is really critical.
Yeah, that's great advice. I'll let you answer this one, Nick, because you might have looked at this in some of your projects. Was there any consideration given to covering the dam completely and piping the water to troughs just to try and minimise that evaporative loss? So fence the dam off and just treat it as a water holding, and then pipe the water elsewhere?
Certainly seen a couple of examples of that, maybe more where they're integrated into sort of cropping focused operations, but where they've built like a 1 hectare of catchment, fully lined dam, and then they've got what's that set up? I think they've got like 8 250,000 litre tanks, so they've then got 2 megalitres of water sort of parked there. So we're sort of seeing some examples of that sort of scale of things. So that's certainly there. Forgot the other bit of your question.
Yeah, just whether you'd seen that before and looked at it. That's great.
Oh,
Thank
yeah,
you.
I was going to say, yeah, the other thing we did some work with the Water Corporation, so entirely covered dams. So they've got a down near they ran a trial at Wellstead, and they've extended that to a couple of other more sort of remote sort of individual town supply systems that they run. So that sort of thing, they've got these floating modular covers, thing called hexacover, that all sort of tessellate and whatever together. But yeah, they were a really expensive solution. The money stacked up for Water Corporation, but only because they're paying $60 a kilolitre to get water into remote areas via tankers. So for them, it was an economic solution, but some of those more continuous covers have seen examples where people do entirely covered sort of catchments with things like very thick shade cloths, or basically building a shed over your dam. The economics of those don't really stack up unless you've got a really, like for some high valued horticulture, it maybe gets there, but for the sorts of, broadacre farming systems, livestock focused systems that we're sort of talking about, yeah, the probably economics aren't really there for that.
Yeah, terrific. Thanks for answering that. Wayde, I've got a question for you about your aggregate screening. The questions come about whether that's a significant cost in terms of time, or it sounds like the materials may not be huge because you're using on-farm materials, but certainly the amount of time to do it would be a cost. Yeah, so can you shed some more light on around the aggregate screening process and the cost of that? And this person's actually requested some photos, so we might get you to share some of them later. But yeah, just what are your thoughts on that?
Look, it's very low cost. We built the screening setup ourselves. I haven't done the economics on what it actually costs per tonne to screen, but it's the site itself is located quite central on the farm. At best, we've maybe got a 5, 6, 7K haul to the paddock. It's really just 2 operators, 2 loaders are running. It'd really only be $1 or $2 probably per tonne to have it screened. And just going back to Nick's comment there on entirely covering dams, is something I've noticed potentially could be a problem, is if the catchment's not right and there's the chance for any silt or soil to get washed into the dam on a heavy rainfall, having a fully covered dam, that'll potentially get the cover stuck under soil and not work at all.
Be a bit fun to clean it out too.
Yeah, very hard to do.
Oh, great practical tips. Thanks, guys. A question from Michael in the chat. How do you go pre-filtering the dam for the desal plant compared to a groundwater sourced water?
Yeah, okay. There's no pre-filtering. The pre-filtering is done internally. There is for a coarser set of filters where the dam water first goes through, then into some lots smaller micro filters before it goes into the reverse osmosis. That's on the desal plant. So it is filtered twice before it gets into the reverse osmosis filters, and the 3 kV, the pump that's running all of that has a water sump. There's no oil, so that water's got to be good in there for that pump to run everything internally. So it's pretty important in our desalination system. The water is pretty clean. We probably lose 1/3 of it to make 2/3. So for every litre, we only getting 2/3 of a litre out of it. And just going back to key dams, we do fence off the key dams so the stock don't spoil them, and that water is generally pushed with there's some pretty good solar pumps out there these days. You can push the water miles in solar pumps, and we just let it settle into big tanks. I'm talking 300,000-400,000 litre tanks, and then we filter that out of there into boom sprays. So that's how we filter that water. And that also, we don't filter it if it's going down to troughs or cup and saucers from those points.
Thanks, Michael. And Michael, just staying with you, have you got any plans now that you've heard from Nick and all the other projects that have been happening out there? I'm sure you have to absorb some more information, but have you got any more plans for future work, or is it just ongoing maintenance of your existing infrastructure around water capturing and management for the next 5, 10, 2 years? Like what are your plans?
To maintain and improve catchments, but I'm listening to Nick's talk, and I've read a bit about the covering, or I know the balls evaporate a bit, and then you got the hexagons and that can sit in there, but it's obviously cheaper to use tarp. Might give one of those a bit of a go in maybe one of our key dams, but probably only cover a quarter of it and see if we can slow down that evaporation rate. Yeah, and look, putting a silt trap in front of these dams too. We've been doing a lot of that to stop that silt getting in there, and so we're maintaining, if we've slushed them or cleaned them out with a scoop over the last 10, 15 years, we've made sure when we do up the catchment that we put a silt trap in front of those dams so that that dam holds as much water as it can.
Yeah, terrific. And Wayde, what about you?
I was going to say, you'll have to jump on our water evaluation platform, and you can put in a trial cover, and it'll tell you how much water you might save.
Love it. Love that plug. Thanks, Nick. Everyone go on, check out that water evaluation platform, and it'll tell you what you need to do. Wayde, what about you? Just final thoughts on where to from here, and any other ideas that have popped into your head, and future initiatives you want to do over the coming years. Just water pressure is going to continue for all of us. I think we can all agree. So yeah, what are your future plans with management and quality?
So we're probably looking to doing, I think, more covers. We've certainly got a few more pasture paddocks that, well, they're always going to be a pasture paddock, and we need water in those dams at the start of lambing, so early in the season. So we'll look at more covers there, and like Michael was saying, just tidying up dams, cleaning dams out. Getting anything that's got eroded catchment looking Mickey Mouse. And I have really been considering with a few of our spots that even on a dry year that do get waterlogged every year, is doing some drainage into like a holding sump and potentially pumping that up into a tank. These areas, even if it's a decile 1 or 2, still catch water, and then being able to pump that around the time.
Terrific. Sounds like you got your hands full with all that going forward. And Nick, just final thoughts and reflections and advice on farmers just going forward, and being mindful of this not just being something that has to be done now, but in preparation for the years to come.
Yeah, I think been a great project to be involved with, and been really great with, I think, the way that we've sort of had people like Wayde and others with some of the ideas that they've been keen to test. So I think really for me, it's there's no one right answer. There's no one, go and put a cover on every dam, or go and do this, or go and do that. So you've got to look at the nature of your farm business, the nature of your climate, your nature of your soils, the nature of all of those residual water resources and investments that you've got, and then making the most with things. I think some great messages from both Wayde and Michael, the sorts of things that we'd like to see. Thinking strategically, chipping away with things. Water is part of everything else. You've got to keep innovating. You've got to keep moving, and you can't get left behind. And that's on your farming system or your genetics, and your water's part of that story. Yeah, it's really, really powerful message.
Thanks so much, Nick, and thanks to all of the speakers for giving up your time today. We really appreciate all of those tips and insights into improving how we manage water. I'm just going to wrap things up, but before you all dash off and tune out to what I'm about to say, I'm just going to launch a quick poll which will take you 1 minute, I promise, or 30 seconds to complete, just to give us some feedback on today's webinar. AWI Extension WA operates off feedback from wool growers, so please fill that out and let us know what you thought of today's session. If you haven't already, please keep in touch and stay up to date across the AWI Extension WA network. We're on Facebook, X, subscribe to our newsletter on the website, and make sure you get in touch via that email address, or our contact details are available on the website as well. Thanks again, everyone, for your time today, and to the guest speakers. Really appreciate it. And I'll let you all go about your day. Thanks again.